Even as we grieve, we give thanks for this most faithful life. I am deeply aware of this great inheritance and of the duties and heavy responsibilities.
The golden carriages and ceremonial crowns are theater, always have been. Real power inside the British monarchy has never lived in the throne room. It lives behind locked doors, in private studies, in conversations that never appear in official records. On the morning of March 7, 2026, one of those conversations happened, and it changed everything. King Charles III did not abdicate. His face still appears on the currency, his name on official documents. But the man who now holds actual authority, the final say, the veto power, the ability to determine whether the House of Windsor survives the next decade, is not Charles, it is William. The reason it happened now, the reason it could not wait another week, comes down to one thing: a betrayal, not from an enemy of the crown, not from a politician or a journalist or a foreign government. The betrayal came from inside the palace, from the one person who should have been the king's closest ally during the worst crisis of his reign, his own wife. The palace is in a state of controlled chaos. The power structure that governed this institution for decades has been dismantled and rebuilt overnight. This is the story the palace does not want you to fully understand. The letters patent, the silent coronation. There was no fanfare, no public announcement, no carefully staged ceremony in Westminster Abbey with bishops and orbs and the slow, solemn weight of 1,000 years of tradition. At 3 o'clock in the morning on March 7, 2026, King Charles III signed a set of letters patent, and with that signature, quiet, private, witnessed by a small number of senior palace officials in a room that most of the world will never see, the architecture of power inside the British monarchy was fundamentally restructured. Letters patent are not new. They have been used for centuries as the legal mechanism through which the crown formally grants authority, titles, and powers. But what was signed in the early hours of this morning was not routine. Sources inside the palace describe it as the activation of something insiders are calling the regent mechanism, a transfer of final authority to the Prince of Wales that goes well beyond anything previously granted to an heir in the modern era. What does final authority actually mean in practice? It means Prince William now holds a supreme veto power over decisions related to palace security, personnel, and the royal budget. It means that on the matters that most directly determine the monarchy's survival, crisis management, institutional reputation, the handling of the Andrew scandal and everything connected to it, William's judgment is final, not advisory, not influential, final. And it means that Queen Camilla, the sitting queen consort, has effectively been bypassed. To understand how a king could reach the point of signing away this level of authority while his reign is still technically active, you have to understand the moment that forced his hand. Not the Andrew arrest in February, not the cancer diagnosis that has been slowly reshaping the king's capacity since 2024, something more immediate, something that happened in the hours before those letters patent were signed. According to sources close to the royal household, Prince William entered the king's private study at 2:15 in the morning, carrying a leather-bound folder. He did not arrive with a request. He arrived with evidence. Evidence of something that Charles, in his most exhausted and most clear-eyed moments, had perhaps suspected but had not been ready to confront directly. Evidence that Queen Camilla had been actively maintaining contact with individuals connected to the Andrew and Epstein scandal. Not despite knowing it was a liability to the crown, but while actively resisting William's attempts to enforce a clean break. The conversation that followed was not long. Charles, visibly weakened by his ongoing cancer treatment, looked at the documents his son placed before him. According to those with knowledge of what happened in that room, he studied them for less than a minute. Then he pushed the papers across the desk. His words, as relayed by a senior courtier present that night, were a whisper. "Then the burden is yours, William. Do what must be done." 10 words. And with them, the most significant private transfer of royal authority since the Regency crisis of the early 19th century was complete. Here is the first question we want you to think about, and we genuinely want your answer in the comments below. Does a king who is physically unwell and emotionally exhausted have the capacity to make a decision of this magnitude freely? Or does the fact that William brought the evidence at 2 a.m., when his father was at his most vulnerable, tell us something important about the nature of this power transfer? The betrayal. What Camilla did and why it mattered. To understand why Charles signed those letters patent this morning, you need to understand exactly what was in that leather-bound folder. Because the story of Camilla's so-called betrayal is not simple, and it will not be understood correctly if it is reduced to a headline. The timeline begins in late 2025, when William reportedly obtained access to a secondary cache of correspondence from within the ongoing United States Department of Justice investigation. Among those documents were emails that placed Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, the ex-wife of Prince Andrew, in direct financial communication with Jeffrey Epstein as far back as October 2009. The specific message that became the flashpoint of everything that followed shows Ferguson writing to Epstein in a state of evident desperation, requesting urgent financial assistance to stabilize her business interests during a period of serious difficulty. To most observers, that is a deeply embarrassing piece of correspondence, a senior royal adjacent figure caught asking a convicted sex offender for money during a moment of personal crisis. To William, it was something categorically more serious. It was evidence of financial dependence on a man whose entire network was built on leverage and blackmail. Anyone who had reached out to Epstein for money had, in William's analysis, created a permanent vulnerability, a point of potential pressure that bad actors could exploit indefinitely. That made them, in his view, not just embarrassing company for the crown to keep. It made them a genuine security liability. He presented these findings to Charles at a briefing in late January. His language, according to palace insiders present at that meeting, was characteristically direct. He told his father that the monarchy was not merely dealing with a family scandal. It was, in his words, harboring a gateway for blackmail. And he made clear that in his assessment, the choice was binary. The palace ends its association with the Ferguson circle completely, or it accepts the ongoing risk of further, potentially catastrophic exposure. Charles heard the argument. He did not immediately act on it. And that is where Camilla became the central figure in this story. Camilla has been close friends with Sarah Ferguson since the 1970s. That friendship predates her involvement with the royal family. It predates the Ferguson-Andrew marriage. It certainly predates any connection to Epstein. In Camilla's framework, ending a friendship of 50 years because of political pressure and institutional risk calculations is not caution. It is cowardice. It is an abandonment of a person who has been part of her life since before she was anyone's queen consort. She made that position clear. She reportedly told the king directly that William's approach was unnecessarily corporate and that personal loyalty should carry more weight than public relations considerations. William responded not with argument, but with surveillance. Sources have confirmed that William's team tracked at least 4 private meetings between Camilla and Ferguson in the weeks leading up to the February 19th arrest, meetings that did not appear on the official royal calendar, conducted away from palace oversight, suggesting a deliberate effort to maintain contact outside the institutional record. When William confronted Camilla with this information, her response was unambiguous. She told him she would not abandon her friends to satisfy what she characterized as his obsession with a perfect public image. In that moment, according to palace insiders, William made a decision. If Camilla would not voluntarily align herself with the institution's survival strategy, he would present the king with a choice that made her continued resistance the decisive variable. Either Charles would authorize William to enforce the clean hands policy, a total verified public severance from anyone connected to the Andrew circle, or the palace would face the next round of DOJ file releases in a condition of maximum exposure. Faced with that choice, with his health compromised and his faith in Camilla's judgment shaken, Charles chose his son. We want to hear from you directly. Do you think Camilla's determination to protect a 50-year friendship makes her a person of genuine integrity? Someone who refuses to treat human relationships as disposable institutional assets? Or does it make her a liability who put her personal comfort above the survival of an institution that millions of people depend on? Comment loyalty if you respect her stand, or institution if you think William was right. We are reading every single one. The Confrontation. What happened in that tea room? The formal transfer of authority in the early hours of March 7th was the culmination of a conflict that had been building for months. But the most dramatic and most personally revealing moment of this entire crisis happened not at 3 a.m. in a private study over papers and whispers. It happened at 11:15 in the morning, in a tea room at Clarence's house, between two women. Camilla had spent the hours between the signing of the letters patent and that meeting in a state of what sources describe as controlled fury. She had not been present for the night's events. She had not been consulted. She woke up, in effect, to discover that her husband had signed away a significant portion of his authority, and hers, without her knowledge and without her input. Her response was to go on offense. In the hours before the tea, sources report that a series of coordinated leaks were pushed to several media outlets. The narrative being advanced was pointed and personal, that Kate Middleton, operating under the cover of crisis management, had been orchestrating a quiet, sustained campaign to push the king toward an earlier transfer of power than he was genuinely prepared for. That Kate was not a supportive partner helping her husband navigate an impossible situation, but an ambitious strategist using a vulnerable man's illness as an opportunity to accelerate her own ascent. It was a serious accusation, and it was designed to land on the one pressure point that Camilla understood intuitively: the public's affection for Charles and their potential suspicion of a daughter-in-law moving too fast. But the counteroffensive did not survive contact with what happened in that tea room. When Camilla and Kate sat down together at Clarence's house, the atmosphere was, in the words of one senior royal aide present, suffocating. What had been a strained but functional relationship between the two most senior women in the royal household had, by that morning, become something openly adversarial. Camilla did not hold back. Her voice, witnesses say, carried both anger and a kind of exhausted desperation. She looked directly at Kate and said words that have since been confirmed by multiple sources inside the palace. "Do not think for a second that your savior act is fooling anyone. You are playing a dangerous game, Catherine, acting as the royal architect while the king is still breathing. You are reaching for the crown before the seat is even warm." The room went silent, and Kate, the woman the palace had spent years cultivating as the model of composed, warm, unflappable royal dignity, did not flinch. She sat there with the kind of stillness that is not passivity but its precise opposite, the stillness of someone who already knows what is about to happen and is choosing to let it unfold. Because 30 seconds later, Prince William walked through the door. He did not come to argue. He did not come to defend his wife or to escalate the personal dimensions of the conflict. He came with a black leather folder, and he placed it on the table between the two women. Inside the folder were surveillance photographs, taken 48 hours earlier. They showed Queen Camilla entering a private apartment under the cover of darkness, and the person she was meeting was Sarah Ferguson. This was not ambiguous. This was not deniable. This was documented evidence that at the precise moment the palace was publicly projecting a clean total break from the Andrews Circle, the Queen Consort was conducting secret, off-calendar meetings with the person at the center of that circle. William's voice, according to every witness account, was quiet, cold, entirely without the emotional register that these kinds of confrontations usually carry. He gave Camilla a binary choice: accept a quiet, permanent withdrawal from all strategic decision-making and retire to a consultative role, a palace term that everyone in that room understood to mean the permanent sidelines, or the photographs, along with phone logs linking her office to Andrew's legal team, would find their way into public circulation by morning. It was the ultimatum to end all ultimatums, and it was delivered with the measured precision of someone who had been preparing it for a very long time. Here is what we want you to tell us. Was William right to use surveillance of his own stepmother as leverage in a family confrontation? Is there a line between protecting an institution and conducting what amounts to an internal intelligence operation against a member of your own family? And did William cross it this morning? Comment necessary, or crossed a line below. This is exactly the kind of question that defines how history will judge this moment. Kate, the iron hand in a velvet glove. The world has spent years watching Kate Middleton become Catherine, Princess of Wales. The carefully composed photographs, the charitable work, the flawless public appearances that somehow managed to feel both aspirational and approachable. The grace under pressure during her own health challenges that inspired genuine public affection and concern. That image is real, but it is not complete, because alongside the grace and the warmth and the public warmth that has made Kate the most popular royal in the family, there is another dimension to the Princess of Wales that the palace has allowed to remain largely invisible, until now. Kate is the chief strategic mind behind everything that has happened in the past 24 hours. Sources inside the palace have been describing her role in terms that would surprise anyone whose understanding of her is shaped by the public image alone. While Camilla was maintaining private meetings with Sarah Ferguson and pushing back against William's institutional overhaul, Kate was doing something entirely different with her time and energy. She was building the legal and financial firewall that made this morning possible. According to sources familiar with her activities over the past several weeks, Kate has been coordinating with specialized legal advisors, working through the financial and constitutional implications of William's authority transfer to ensure that every step of the process was, as one advisor put it, legally airtight. She understood that the greatest vulnerability in what William was attempting was not the personal or political resistance it would generate. It was the possibility of a legal challenge that could unravel the process from the outside. She closed that vulnerability systematically, methodically, with the kind of focus that reportedly left even experienced legal professionals describing her as, in the words of one advisor, terrifyingly precise. The most striking reported example of her approach came during a briefing several nights before the letters patent were signed. Kate was chairing a meeting focused specifically on ensuring that not a single pound of the sovereign grant, the public funding that sustains the monarchy, could be linked to the mounting legal costs associated with Andrew's arrest and its consequences. Her directive, as relayed by someone present at that meeting, was blunt to the point of being startling. "We are not in the business of saving a man's reputation. We are in the business of saving the crown for Prince George. If a single pound of the royal estate is linked to Andrew's defense, we have failed. Cut him loose, legally and financially, today." That statement tells you everything you need to know about how Kate understands her role. And it illuminates why the conflict between her and Camilla goes so much deeper than a disagreement over strategy. Camilla views the monarchy through the lens she has always viewed it, through the relationships and loyalties and personal histories that shaped her life before she ever set foot inside the royal family, through the friendships that stretch back 50 years, through a framework where human beings owe each other something that institutions cannot and should not override. Kate views the monarchy through an entirely different lens, through the future, specifically through the future of her son Prince George, who will one day inherit whatever William and Kate build, or fail to build, during this critical period. For Kate, the Andrew scandal is not a family embarrassment to be managed with sensitivity and discretion. It is an existential threat to the institution that George will inherit. And existential threats do not get the benefit of sentiment. This is the fundamental divide that the events of March 7th have made visible. Two women, two completely different frameworks for what the monarchy is, what it owes to the people inside it, and what it owes to the people outside it. And as of this morning, one of those frameworks has won. We want your honest take on this. Is Kate the kind of future queen that the British monarchy needs to survive the 21st century? Or is there something being lost, something important and irreplaceable, in a monarchy that operates on pure strategic calculation, with no room for the messy, inconvenient humanity that Camilla represents? Comment, future queen, or too cold below. The fallout. What happens to Camilla now? By the time the afternoon of March 7th settled into early evening, the power structure inside Buckingham Palace had been permanently altered. The question that remained, the question that will define the next chapter of this story, is what happens to the people left standing in the wreckage. Camilla has cancelled her scheduled public appearances for the remainder of the week. Sources confirm she has retreated to her private quarters. The coordinated leaks targeting Kate, the attempt to reframe the power transfer as a manipulation of a sick king, backfired with decisive force the moment William placed that folder on the table in the Clarence house tea room. She is now, in the language of palace insiders, in a consultative role, a phrase whose gentleness is entirely at odds with what it actually means. It means she has been sidelined. Her access to the sovereign's archives has been restricted. Her influence over palace personnel and budget decisions has been removed. The gatekeeper function she has performed for years, controlling access to Charles, shaping the information that reaches him, influencing the decisions that flow from his office, is gone. She still has the title. She will still appear at official functions beside the king. The public face of the monarchy will, for now, maintain its composed projection of normality and stability. But everyone inside those walls knows what has changed. And here is the dimension of this story that most coverage will miss. Camilla's removal from the center of power does not resolve the risk. It may, in some ways, intensify it, because Camilla is not the only variable in this equation. Sarah Ferguson, the woman at the center of everything, the friendship that became the flashpoint, the person whose correspondence with Epstein set this entire sequence in motion, is reportedly still holding cards that have not yet been played. Intelligence insiders have suggested that Ferguson possesses a secondary set of documents, financial in nature, that reach beyond the 2009 email exchange and into the private financial arrangements of the royal household during the early 2000s. If Ferguson concludes that she has been irrevocably cornered by William's clean hands policy, if she determines that quiet cooperation is no longer in her interest, the next explosion could be considerably more damaging than Andrew's arrest. William has built a palace of glass in the name of transparency, and glass, however beautiful and however functional, has one unavoidable property: it fractures. Here is a question we need you to answer. If Sarah Ferguson releases additional files that expose further royal financial arrangements, does William's new authority give him the tools to contain the damage? Or has he created a situation where his own demand for transparency becomes the weapon used against the institution he is trying to protect? What comes next? The shadow reign takes shape. As the first full day of William's final authority draws to a close, the monarchy that exists tonight is structurally different from the monarchy that existed yesterday morning. Not on paper, not in the official constitutional documents, not in the public record, but in the corridors and the meeting rooms and the private studies where the real decisions of the real institution are actually made. King Charles III remains sovereign. He will continue to fulfill the ceremonial and constitutional functions of the crown. His signature will continue to appear on the documents that require a royal signature. He will continue to receive the heads of state and attend the public engagements and perform the ancient, visible rituals of kingship that give the monarchy its public legitimacy. But the strategic decisions, the ones that determine whether the monarchy emerges from this crisis intact or continues to bleed public trust until the calls for abolition become impossible to ignore, those decisions belong to William. His blueprint for what the institution becomes under his authority is already visible in the actions of this single day. A smaller, leaner operation, fewer working royals, tighter control over who is permitted to represent the crown in public. The era of an extended royal family drawing on public resources and royal prestige while generating scandal after scandal is, in William's monarchy, finished. Zero tolerance for association with anything that can be connected to the network of financial and personal compromises that the Epstein investigation has exposed. Not zero tolerance in theory, applied selectively when convenient, but zero tolerance as a genuine operating principle, one that has already been demonstrated to apply regardless of personal history, regardless of title, and regardless of proximity to the king himself. And full financial and operational transparency. The gray men who have historically operated in the shadows of the palace, managing information, protecting individuals, making consequential decisions without public accountability, are discovering that the new authority structure has no use for them. William is building the institution from the foundation up, and Kate, operating as the strategic partner and legal architect of everything he is constructing, is ensuring that what they build cannot be easily undone. What remains genuinely uncertain, and this uncertainty is real, not performed, is whether the human cost of this transformation is ultimately sustainable. A YouGov poll from early 2026 already showed support for the monarchy among people under 45 in the United Kingdom at its lowest recorded level. The public's patience with royal scandal has been exhausted by years of revelation and damage. William and Kate are betting that the answer to that exhaustion is transparency and accountability, and the visible, demonstrated willingness to cut loose anyone who cannot meet the new standard. They may be right, but they are also creating a monarchy that has never existed before, one that operates on corporate logic and dynastic calculation, rather than the organic, messy, deeply human qualities that have traditionally made the royal family something more than a government department with better costumes. And whether the British public and the broader global audience that watches the House of Windsor with such undiminished fascination will ultimately prefer the efficient, accountable, scandal-free monarchy of William's vision to the flawed, warm, complicated institution it is replacing is a question that cannot be answered tonight. It can only be answered over the years and decades that follow. The events of March 7, 2026 will be studied and debated long after the people involved have left the stage. Was Charles right to hand final authority to William? Was this the act of a father who loves his son and trusts his judgment, or the act of an exhausted man who needed someone else to carry a burden he could no longer hold alone? Was Camilla's resistance genuinely principled, the stand of a woman who refused to let an institution strip away her humanity? Or was it a catastrophic political miscalculation that cost her everything she had spent decades building? Is Kate the strategist the monarchy needed at this moment? Cold-eyed, legally precise, focused on protecting the crown for the next generation? Or is something being lost in a royal household that now runs on corporate logic and midnight legal briefings? And is William, armed with final authority and backed by an increasingly sidelined king, building a monarchy that can genuinely survive the century ahead? Or is he creating something so controlled, so transparent, so deliberately stripped of the ambiguity that has historically been the monarchy's greatest protection, that he is unknowingly constructing the architecture of its eventual abolition? These are the questions that matter, not just for the royal family, but for every citizen of a country that is being asked in real time whether this institution still deserves a central place in its national life. Tell us what you think in the comments. Team William or Team Camilla? And more importantly, tell us why. This is a conversation with genuine stakes, and your perspective matters. If this breakdown gave you a clearer picture of what is actually happening inside the most scrutinized family on Earth, hit the like button and subscribe. We are tracking every development as it unfolds, because this story is nowhere near over. The shadow reign has begun, and the next chapter is already being written. We will see you there.